Okay, so I'm sure some of you probably play console or have played console before, and you might be transitioning over to H1Z1. I particularly want to make this video because I recently transitioned over to H1Z1 probably about 4 months ago, and I never really knew what the correct key bindings would be. Since I was a console player, I had no idea about PC, like what was a good general setup for key bindings. I didn't even really know what a key binding was, so I just wanted to make a quick video on my particular key bindings for H1Z1 and what kind of helps me out. So what I have here is just a windowed screen of the H1Z1, and I'm going to go through my key bindings, but first I wanted to show you kind of the hardware that I'm working with. The Razer Naga 2014, and then the Black Widow Ultimate keyboard. Now with the Naga, as you can see on the side, there's numbers which I utilize quite a bit. So if you don't have a mouse that has numbers on the side where you have more than 12 buttons to press, then this video might not directly affect you in terms of making things a little bit easier, or whatever you might have to do it the old-fashioned way, where you're switching weapons with the 1, 2, 3 button as opposed to your mouse. And I'll go a little bit into that about switching back and forth with weapons with my mouse as opposed to the keyboard. So if we hop right into my settings, we'll go to key bindings. First and foremost, the camera view toggle. Sorry, what that is basically switching from third person to first person. Mouse button 5, just to show you guys, if you look at the top view, is this button right here. So right underneath the scroll is the button 5, and that's what I use to toggle from first person to third person and vice versa. So if I'm running through a building with a shotgun and I want to quickly switch to my shotgun and I want to switch to first person, I don't have to reach my finger clear across the keyboard, or what to me feels like across the keyboard, to switch to first person. So I utilize my mouse quite a bit, as you will see. So that's the first person. Group chat stuff, that stuff is kind of personal preference, like whatever you want it to set it as, it doesn't really matter. Tab I keep, or the inventory I keep is tab, that's normal. The open map on the keyboard, I use the letter V as in Victor, and that's close to your WASD you have, and it's relatively close. I know it doesn't need to be something like a primary button where it needs to be close to my left hand, because you don't really open the map that much in relation to all the other buttons that you could press. So I have it to V, where it's, if I'm in the car, if I'm driving, I could quickly hit V to open up the map and close it at the same time. So I feel like that's a good position for opening the map. If we just roll through here, the report player, that's that, in proximity chat, personal preference. Okay, so render distance, H1Z1 recently incorporated the render distance increase and decrease. You used to have to tab and then go to an option and then increase or decrease your render distance that way. Now they made it a little bit easier where it's a key binding. So I use the number 8 and the number 5, and that again will be on my mouse, and it's on the side view, 5 being there and 8 being there. So that's just an easy way that I increase and decrease the render distance. And how that benefits you, or how that would benefit you, is if you're running through a residential area, it's going to take up a lot more of your processor. It's going to affect the way the game is played. And I had problems with that because I had a really shitty processor before. So I'd have to switch my render distance. If I'm out in the fields and I want to see where the drop's coming in, or I want to see if there's a player up on a hill, if I'm at 500 render distance, I'm not going to be able to see that. So this is just a quick way that I could switch to 1,000 or 1,500 and then drop it back to 500 relatively quickly if I'm driving or whatever. So that seems to work for me. Screenshots, just print screen. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Weapon stance, that doesn't really affect anything. I think that's pretty much it on the general. So when you're on foot, Autorun, I have the 6, and again, that's another mouse command 6. It's near my thumb, but not too close to where I'm going to be in a gunfight and I'm going to accidentally bump into 6. So I use 6 just to Autorun. It's better than I think the plus minus was the original, or the equals plus whatever it was on the top right next to the backspace was the Autorun. I think that's the default. So I don't want to have to reach across the keyboard again to go into an Autorun. It's easy for me to just quickly click 6. Now I got 12 buttons here. I don't use all 12, so I might utilize as much as I can just to make it a little bit easier. So I use 6. I have a key binded for the number 6 on the mouse. Bandages is Q. I believe that's default. Crouch is C, which is default, but I like the C position. They just came out with a patch where you can't really spam crouch shoot with now. But it's still nice to have relatively close to my, my pointer finger on my left hand. I can use to crouch when need be. If I get out of a car and I need to quickly crouch, it's right there. So I like to use that. Fire's left mouse. That's kind of obvious. Fist is 4. That's personal preference. Free look is the left alt. Interact, I believe the default is F. I switch it to E. I think that's just the normal kind of every game general interact key command or key binding. So I just switched it to E. Jump is spacebar. I've noticed that some people switch that up. They like to use a letter as opposed to the spacebar. They use spacebar for crouch or whatever, but I prefer spacebar to jump. And then WASD to, forward, back, left, and right. Now the next weapon, it says right here to scroll down, the mouse scroll down, but I actually turned off my scroll. I was having some issues switching guns and all that, so I just completely eliminated the scroll button. So even though it's a key binding for the next weapon, it doesn't work because I turned it off. Other medical is F, so that would be like a first aid normally, or you could put a pro coag in there. I like it because it's right next to my finger. That's an important button. Obviously, if you're in a gunfight and you're low on health, you need a first aid or you need to hit a pro coag. It's right next to your finger. It's probably the closest button to your WASD. Well, it is the closest button to your WASD. So I like F to be the other medical. Again, the previous weapon, I turned off the scroll. Z is prone. I'm not much of a prone shooter. I don't drop into prone in a gunfight, so that doesn't really matter. It's okay. It's relatively close. If I want to loot somebody and I'm afraid I'm going to get shot, I can hit Z. It's right there. It's not that big of a deal, but it doesn't get in the way at the same time. Reloads R. That's kind of standard. Left shift is sprint or hold your breath if you have the sniper, and then WASD. So weapons 1, 2, and 3. This is probably the biggest point that I wanted to make and how I have this configured. So it's quite simple. Weapon 1, weapon 2, weapon 3 corresponds with 1, 2, and 3, which is normally right above the W button 1, 2, and 3. What I've noticed is that it's kind of difficult sometimes for me to reach my ring finger all the way up to hit 1, or my index finger all the way up to 3 and 4. I usually get those mixed up, or I hit them both at the same time. So what I did was, if you look at my Razer Synapse, what I did was on the top view, these buttons click essentially. So this is like a zoomed in version of the mouse of the scroll wheel, and this is why I disabled the scroll command, or the scroll binding, if you will, on the mouse, is because I use this. You can kind of click the scroll wheel left and right, and you can click it down as well. So what I have is 8 is essentially 1, 9 is 2, and then if you click down, the button 3 would be my third weapon. So essentially I'm using the scroll wheel. If I click left, that brings me to my number 1 weapon. If I click right, that brings me to my number 2 weapon. And if I click straight down, that takes me to my third weapon. So it's an easy way for me, not having to really move my fingers on the keyboard that much. I'm able to switch to weapon 1, weapon 2, and weapon 3 relatively easy. Pulling out my fist is, I'll be okay with reaching up to hit the number 4. So it's not that big of an issue. But this is probably the most important part of my mouse, is using this 8, 9, and 3 button to utilize my primary, my secondary, my third weapon. So I really enjoyed that, and actually sometimes if my scroll wheel or that doesn't work, then I'm kind of screwed because it's hard for me to get used to using the actual 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard. So that's important with the on foot. Then in the rides, again, bandages is Q. I believe that is default. Boost is left shift or right shift, depending. Exit vehicle, again, I think this is similar to the interact button on the default. It's F. I prefer E, so I just switch it to E. So it's my interact and my exit vehicle are the same thing, so I'm used to that. Spacebar is the handbrake. I just took off headlights. You're never going to need your headlights. I've never come across an incident or an instance where you needed headlights, so I just completely eliminated that. I think it might have been G or J or something. The horn is G. I don't utilize the horn, so I just made it something somewhat close in case I did. Look down is down. This is all with your mouse. Backward, forward. Control seats 1, 2, and 3. That's if you want to switch seats in the car. I don't think you can do that on the go anymore. You have to be a complete stop. And then sirens X if you have the cop car. Okay, so the start stop engine. That's probably the most important part of the rides. If you're in a car or your truck or whatever. So K is the start stop. So you used to be able to ghost ride up on people. And they wouldn't be able to hear your car whatsoever. They kind of patched that to where there's still, even though your engine shuts off, you can still hear the car moving. So I have it. I think the default is K. So what I did was on my Razer Synapse, I essentially turned K into number 4. So number 4 on the side of the mouse, number 4, I key binded to K, so I didn't have to change it in game. So every time that I'm driving, 4 seems to be on that pad on the side of my mouse, seems to be a very comfortable position. So when I'm driving and I want to ghost ride, I simply click that button and it shuts my car off. And I find that to be quite I'm used to that, because if I'm in a gunfight and I want to glide down on somebody, I don't want to have to reach my hand across the keyboard to hit K and then bring it back and hopefully have my fingers land where they need to be. Now, some players are good with that. Some people like that. And again, this is really all personal preference. I just kind of wanted to explain my side of things and kind of how things work out with me, because when I first came to PC, I had no idea like what key bindings were, how they worked, like what would be comfortable, what was expected, or whatever. I mean, I had no idea. So hopefully this will help somebody out. But essentially, that's pretty much it. The emotes are kind of useless at this point. So hopefully that helped you out or helped somebody out a little bit. Again, all of this can be adjusted to your personal preference. This is just what I use in particular. Depending on what mouse you have, that's going to make a huge difference. I use the Naga that has the number pad on the side, so I utilize a lot of the numbers. If I didn't have this mouse, or if I had something that didn't have a keypad on the side, a lot of this would change, and a lot of this would be different. So hope this video helped you out. If it did, like, subscribe, comment, do all that cool shit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.